Hi, my name is Ron. I'm with Mobile Fix Automotive, and I'm going to bring another video to you today dealing with the 2003 Ford Expedition that's got a 5.4 in it. Customer complaint was misfire on startup and smell of coolant. They did a bunch of diagnostics on their own and wasn't able to come up with anything. Brought it in and I looked at it, and this is something that I don't see very often, but now that I'm here and I got somebody that can film it, I'm going to go ahead and show you what I did. So once again, what we've got is coolant was kind of disappearing. Nothing visually on the outside. When it first got here, I did a pressure test with this tool right here, which goes on the radiator. Well, the overflow bottle in this particular case, it pressurizes the cooling system and basically makes the cooling system feel like it's under pressure from normal heat. After about 15-20 minutes of sitting under pressure, it was losing pressure on the gauge, but I didn't notice any leaks externally on the engine. And the codes that this vehicle had when it came in that he was concerned with was a p0302, which is cylinder 2 misfire, and a p0316, which is misfire at startup. Typically what I've seen with these engines, with my experience, is if you get a 316 and then any one of the individual cylinders, and it seems like it's usually always either cylinders 1 or 2 that I've seen, if you see those two codes together, a 316 and then any single individual misfire, this has almost always been the culprit, but it's just something for you to look at. So I'll let the cat out of the bag and tell you what the problem with his engine is right now, but I'm also walking you through the process of how I diagnosed it. So once we got the system pressurized, I went through and checked the system, checked for misfires. At the time when he dropped it off and it was hot, it was not misfiring, wasn't showing any. When I pressurized the system and I'd start the vehicle up about 5 minutes later, the scan tool would show misfires on cylinder 2 for about 3 seconds, and then they'd go away. What is causing that in his particular case is he actually has a blown head gasket, but it's not blown in the sense that most of us people remember, where there's water in the oil or the car is overheating and there's pressure in the cooling system. This is a very, very minor leak, and it's allowing coolant to drip into the cylinder when the engine is off, but it's not allowing compression to go back into the radiator circuit and overpressurize that system. So for those of you that are having a problem with a 316 and any one of the individual cylinder misfires, I want you to look for this, and this is what you're going to do. By the way, we have a new cameraman, Thomas, who's going to be with us for a while. So this is a radiator pressure tester, and I have it hooked up. It basically replaces the radiator cap that's on the overflow bottle, and you basically can pump this up. Okay, right now it's bled down to 10 pounds. I'm going to pump it back up to 15. You really don't want to go above 15. The red zone on this thing is set at 18. And if you get up into the red zone, you can actually damage stuff, you know, blow things apart, radiator seams and stuff like that. So 15 is about as max as you want to go. So I pressurized this. I pulled the spark plug on cylinder number 2, which was the one that was showing us misfires. And I looked at the spark plug, and the spark plug actually didn't look half bad. It's a little dirty. It says he changed them a while ago, but I'm assuming that because of the coolant leak, it looks uglier than it needs to be. So in some of my other videos, the spark plug blowouts and stuff like that, you'll see me use this. This is called a Borescope. It's basically a high definition camera. This one's been with me for a lot of years, so it's not as high tech as some of the newer ones are, but it's been with me for so long, I kind of stick with it. So I'm going to send this down into this spark plug hole where the spark plug came out of. And you can see as we enter the hole, you'll see the threads right there. That's where the spark plug threads are. And if we were to take the time and count them, we'll find out that there's only 4.5 threads on this one. We're going to go down in here to the bottom of the cylinder, and I don't know if you can see it right there. right where my finger's at. There's a big puddle of coolant right there. Now that puddle of coolant took some time. It's like my camera's going in and out, huh? There we go. See that puddle of coolant right there? That's been just a drip by drip for the last hour or so. And what happens is when you start the engine, all this coolant overcomes the electrode on the spark plug and the fuel from the fuel injector, and it causes an engine miss. Once the engine fires up and all this coolant goes out the exhaust, the leak is so minuscule that the engine starts running normal again, and it's just this vicious cycle of trying to find this coolant leak and this misfire. And I know that there's a lot of people that see this. I only see this a few times. Go ahead and get me on camera. I only see this a few times. I think this is probably the 6th time I've ever seen this on one of these Triton engines. So it's not something I do on a daily basis, but now that I know what to look for, I can usually call it before the vehicle even gets here, which I kind of did on this one. So for those of you that are dealing with any of the Triton family, it doesn't matter if it's a 2-valve or a 3-valve as far as this particular problem, because the design of the engine is pretty much the same. Although I have not physically seen this on a 3-valve engine. 2-valve, which is what this is, 2-valve modular engine. Like I said, this is about the 6th one I've seen. So just trying to give you guys a heads up on stuff you can look for misfires. Why don't you pause for a second so my cameraman brought up the fact that it'd be a good idea for me to point out to you one of the things that I feel, and I'm going to say feel, may be causing this to happen. So the cylinder head gaskets on these are held down. You've got a cast iron block, which means you basically got a metal engine block, and you have an aluminum cylinder head. They're 2 different types of metal. They expand and contract at 2 different rates. The aluminum cylinder head is a softer, more porous metal, so it expands and contracts faster. The head bolts that hold the head to the block are what's called a torque to yield. And what that basically means is, in the old days when we used to torque cylinder heads when I was younger, you would torque them to a specific value. Let's say the old small block Chevys being around 65 foot-pounds. You would torque them, and then in some cases the manufacturer would have you go back and retorque them after you did an engine warm-up. Well, these new engines, especially these overhead cam engines, that's almost impossible to do without huge amounts of labor. So I believe that the engineers came up with an idea called torque to yield, which is a head bolt that when you tighten it down, you go to a specific torque, like say 22 or 30 pounds, and then you do 90 degrees and another 90 degrees. And what you're doing is you're literally stretching the bolt, so the bolt is always holding the head down regardless. Well, if your engine goes through an overheat process, or the bolts just end up being weak from being bad metal, those bolts can stretch, and when they stretch, they will not go back to their normal state because they don't have the elasticity or whatever you want to use the word for to be able to get them back. And that will allow the head gasket to bypass. And that's kind of probably what happened with this. It more than likely had an overheat. It's a relatively new purchase for the owner. He's only had it for a couple of months, so there's a lot of history that he does not know. It probably got hot at some point in its life, and this was the reason why it got sold, was because it had this issue. And this issue is hard to find if you don't know what you're looking for. So once again, my name is Ron, and I'm with Mobile Fix Automotive, and I'm hoping that this helps you out. Like and subscribe to my channel, it helps me. And I'll shoot another one, and we'll see if we can get a lot more of these things posted, all right? We'll see you on the next video. Thanks, guys.